I bet you didn't expect that coming. Hello loves, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to another history video where I am going to tell you about the Wild West. Kind of. So those who are kind of new to my channel, I actually used to be a very strict short media content creator over on an app called This. Yeah. And in honor of the very last limited history series I ever did, it is the 1-year anniversary of Wendy Goes Wild! Wendy Goes Wild was actually the very last short form content series I ever did on that platform. And it is the 1st-year anniversary of it. So in honor, this video is going to be a compilation of all of my Wendy Goes Wild videos. And you will learn something, I guarantee you. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And stick around for the compilation because you just might learn something. Hi, my name is Wendy Weather, and I'm the History Drag Queen, and welcome to my new series, Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the history of the American Wild West. So what is the Wild West, or westward expansion? In the 19th century, America had this mentality called manifest destiny. Now, let's examine what exactly is that. Manifest destiny was actually the phrase coined and used by American settlers, and that American settlers were destined to expand west. Manifest destiny is kind of described as like romantic nationalism and the very early kind of depictions of American imperialism. Basically, it was the collective forethought that all American settlers were destined to go all the way to the Pacific, like literally from one end of the country to the other. That's what we're doing. And so the American settlers went out and did just that. They wanted to settle the West. Well, there were some issues. One, their land, and two, there was already people there. Not only were there native tribes and native peoples occupying that land, but also there were Mexicans who literally were there from Spain, from Spaniard occupation, and then also even French peoples. It would be amiss to not talk about the racial and cultural tragedies and influences that occurred because of westward expansion and manifest destiny ideals. Over the 19th century, which is the 1800s, the American peoples would do very, very intense and catastrophic damage to Native people's culture and the Native people themselves. Now, there was both an economic and racial element of why the white American, like frontiermen, wanted the Native peoples out of the Western lands. One was because they were white and they wanted the land. Two, they wanted it for resources. And at the time was a very bustling and growing Eastern Coast like industry of like industrial revolution and like bustling. And they needed those resources to continue to make that happen. Now, early settlement escapades like the Oregon Trail Rush honestly didn't like result into huge conflicts with Native peoples. It wasn't until around like the 1880s later that white settlers would start and spur a string of conflicts with Native peoples. Not only that, white settlers would continuously catastrophically damage the entirety of Native peoples and tribes. I mean, literally. If you guys didn't know, there actually used to be around 30 million bison in the entirety of the United States, or what was the territory of the United States at the time. And bison was actually one of, if not the major, like, food source for Native peoples. And they were like, yeah, we're gonna get rid of that. They literally slaughtered over 30 million bison, literally from 1800 to 1890. Millions of bison. Started off as 30 million bison. By 1890, there was only about 300. 300. And they did this not to eat them, not to like harvest them for meat and livestock. No, they literally would just, oh, see one, boom, and just leave it. They did not care. They just wanted to damage their main resource. And later, white settlers would actually start and build these boarding schools. And these schools actually were basically just, the white, American people just kind of kidnapping Native children and putting them in these schools to be assimilated, to be more like the white frontier counterpart. They stripped them of their name and their culture, and literally by doing this, they mostly used acts of violence and abuse to these children. And basically, white frontiersmen committed cultural genocide. That's exactly what happened. That is exactly what occurred. But anyway, Cowboys, am I right? She won how much money? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather, and I'm the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild. Let's talk about the legend of Poker Alice. In the Wild West, gambling actually became kind of a very well-to-do profession. Although very male-dominated, but some establishments would let women gamble. One such woman was Alice Ivers Tubbs, otherwise known as Poker Alice. Alice was actually an English immigrant who actually studied poker and how to gamble from her first husband. Alice then started to gamble at these well-known saloons. Now, a little like to paint a picture, Alice was very well educated, well dressed, and she was quite pretty. She very much stood out with like the rugged, outlaw worker men and like all these bar patrons in these saloons who were gambling. Trust me, she used that to her advantage. Alice also had a real liking for cigars, so she would just smoke cigars like in this very lovely outfit, yeah. Alice claimed to have won $250,000 in just gambling profits. Adjusted for inflation, that is $6 million. Six! Later in life, Alice actually opened her own saloon. But Miss Alice was not no meek and mild lady. One time when she was gambling, she actually pew-pewed a minor who threatened her boyfriend at the time. And then later in life, when she had her own saloon, a patron, I think it was a soldier or somebody, was just going absolutely irate, rampaging, just doing crazy things. She pew-pewed him in self-defense and she was acquitted. Okay. Alice unfortunately passed away when she was 79 in Rapid City, South Dakota. Would you have played cards with Poker Alice? Honestly, I would have loved to have played around a Texas Hold'em with Alice. Just to, one, talk to her and kind of learn some tricks. The Wild West wasn't wild. Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild. Did you know, statistically, the Wild West wasn't wild? From what we are indoctrinated as the American Wild West is outlaws, gunslingers, horse chases, and all things crazy. In actuality, from 1859 to 1900, only 12 bank robberies happened in the Wild West. 12. In that entire time span, 12. Also, statistically, there was only about 1.5 to 2 pew-pew related murders in frontier towns. Why? Because usually if you came into a town, you had to go to the sheriff's office and drop off any weapons and register them and have them there and pick them up whenever you leave. The Wild West actually had super, super rigid pew-pew laws. And fun fact, the shootout at the OK Corral, which is like a big, used thing in like American idealism of the Wild West, only 3 people, or I'm pretty sure it was like the people that were starting things, like only 3. That's still high, but like for a whole big huge shootout, that's just, statistically, looking at things back then to today, the modern world has a lot more crime in it. A lot more crime. We should probably be calling it the wild modern world. Okay. He turned into a what? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild, a series where I tell you the history about the American Wild West. Let's talk about Elmer McCurdy. Elmer McCurdy was actually a failed outlaw and or bandit, mostly in the later part of the American Wild West. McCurdy had hatched a plan to rob a passenger train that he had heard had thousands of dollars on it. Well, when he did that, yeah, he was very much incorrect. He made out with 46 bucks, I think, right before he got, by some lawmen. After he was embalmed, his corpse actually became unclaimed. So the mortician or undertaker actually sold his corpse to a traveling circus sideshow. And he was put on display as a sideshow oddity. And later, over the course of about 60 years, McCurdy's corpse was actually bought and sold by dozens of people, wax museums, haunted house exhibits, and of the like. In 1976, he actually ended up in an amusement park funhouse in Long Beach, California. During filming of the television show $6 Million Man, his finger, as a prop, just kind of came off. And when it did, it revealed some human tissue and flesh kind of things. And the production and everybody was like, what's that? That's supposed to be a fake body. What is that? So they called the county coroner's office. And after some more testing by the LA County Coroner's Office, it indeed was decided, oh yeah, that's a body. And it actually was this guy who was an outlaw in 1911. Excuse me, what? So this failed bandit who was so bad at being an outlaw had a very exciting life after he had... What? He was used in dozens of wax museums, haunted exhibits, and the sideshows and circuses. Crazy. And was used as props. What? McCurdy was finally buried 66 years after his death in the very famous Boot Hill Cemetery in Dodge City, Kansas. Honestly, it's kind of iconic. Like, oh, your afterlife? I was just this really famous prop. What? That's crazy. They delivered mail how? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the fun history about the American Wild West. But did you know, during that time, mail was actually delivered by horses, aptly called the Pony Express. When expanding west, they needed faster communications across the Rocky Mountains. So they were like, hey, let's get some guys on some horses and like send some stuff over just real quick, real fast. Until we can like figure something out. Thus, the Pony Express was born. And it only actually lasted about 18 months. So about a year and some change, it was the only thing that connected the east to the west. And logistically, it made a lot more sense. A rider on a horse could get from the east to the west in about 10 days, where a stagecoach could take up to 3 weeks. Now, the Pony Express chair was actually very, very long. It had over 153 stations. It had about 80 riders and anywhere from about 400 to 500 horses. Now, they didn't ride the same horse from one start all the way to the end. No. The reason they had almost over 153 relay stations is because after every 10 to 15 miles, they would actually swap out horses. And each route actually had about 4 to 6 horse relay stations. That way the horses don't get tired. And then, 10 months after its inception, Congress actually passed a bill to support a transcontinental telegraph line. And that telegraph line would actually connect the Missouri River all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And by October of 1861, New York and San Francisco could communicate with a touch of a button. And by November of that year, the last letters of the Pony Express were sent to its recipients, and it was officially shut down. Honestly, it's pretty innovative because at the time, railroads actually didn't even go that far to the west yet. And I think it was really smart to just use horses instead of carriages because of the time delay. And honestly, I wonder what would have happened if Congress at the time hadn't passed that transcontinental telegraph line, like, how much longer would the Pony Express have been able to, like, do everything? I'm sorry, they drank what? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the history about the American Wild West. And did you know the drinks in the Wild West were wild? So the cowboys, miners, and prospectors really weren't very picky about their alcoholic beverages. If it was alcohol, they were gonna drink it, no matter what it was. And one such saloon in Sierra Nevada actually served something called tarantula juice, which basically it was strychnine. And that's not all that was dangerous in tarantula juice. Actually, its alcohol was a wood grain alcohol that was distilled from turpentine. Excuse me, what? Y'all just drinking that? So what happened to these individuals that drank tarantula juice? Well, a couple things. Some of the concoction actually exhibited forms similar to when you ingest other substances, so people became kind of addicted to it. And then basically, you would have these crazy skin spasms and like your whole body would just spasm out. And then you most likely would get lockjaw for a little while, if not like ever. And I think it's funny because even nowadays, y'all be drinking some crazy mess, especially with like nowadays with like the popularity of y'all just drinking Everclear. Y'all know what that is, right? Everclear is sold by Luxco, who basically, it's used in perfumes and like distillery things of like alcohol, rubbing alcohol agents and like perfumes and body colognes. Like literally, y'all can't say nothing. Y'all be drinking Everclear. It is a perfumer's distillery alcohol. It is used in air fresheners and perfume. Y'all just be drinking that? Y'all can't say nothing. Also, don't do that. Don't do any of the things and drink and ingest any of the things I just said in this video. Please don't do that. Who was the most dangerous outlaw? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to my series, Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the history of the American Wild West. So who was the most dangerous outlaw of the Wild West? You would think it's like, oh, maybe it's Billy the Kid or something, like, you know. But no, that actually goes to a man by the name of John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin was from Bonham, Texas, and at the age of 14 is when he started his whole entire journey. It is speculated from his autobiography that 44 people, 44, that's crazy, whilst being an outlaw and a pew-pew man of the Wild West. But after historians have kind of examined some things, it's maybe more closer to 30 people, like, confirmed. Either way, the man was crazy. He even once crossed paths with Sheriff Wild Bill Hickok in Abilene, Kansas, and he actually wasn't even arrested. It's actually unknown, one, why Harding was there, and two, if Sheriff Hickok even knew he was wanted for tons of murder in Texas. Until on August 6, 1871, Hardin actually pew-pewed a guy because he was snoring too loud. It is said Harding went to sleep in his hotel room, but the person in the room next to him was snoring so loud, Harding got so mad, he just pew-pewed into the next room, not even knowing if he hit anything or whatever. But he did. He actually got the guy that was asleep and, you know, he didn't wake up. And, oh, when Sheriff Wild Bill found out, oh, it was over. They chased him all throughout town. Harding actually escaped. And he managed from getting caught until about 4 years later when he pew-pewed a sheriff in Texas. And the sheriff at the time, I guess, was super, super popular. So Harding very much got put in the slammer as quick as possible. And Harding was 21 at the time. Oh yeah, he's a youngster doing all this craziness. He was sentenced to 25 years, but actually only served 17 of those. Because he somehow was pardoned and released. Harding actually passed away 1 year after he was released. How, you may ask? Honestly, how you think? earlier on the day that he croaked, he got in an argument with this random guy. And anyway, super crazy argument. Later in the day, Harding actually goes and plays dice. The guy that he was arguing with just comes in and just pews him right in the good old top. And then did it some more times for good measure. And that is the very story of John Wesley Harding, the most dangerous outlaw in the Wild West, purely because he just pew-pewed and croaked a lot of people. Just boom. I don't know. It could be said he could be an SK. Honestly. That many people? That's crazy. Do you know the most unfortunate hand of cards? Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the history of the American Wild West. Let's talk about the legendary fate of Wild Bill Hickok. Now, Wild Bill Hickok actually is a very well-known Wild West figure. I mean, I even have mentioned him once or twice in past videos for this series. Now, Wild Bill actually expired whilst he was playing poker. Now, pokers and gambling halls were very, very big in the Wild West. I mean, even look at Poker Alice. Gambling halls were really a place for people of like esteem to, you know, play cards and like get some coin. And poker was deemed a very well profession and a very high esteemed sport. So much so, saloons, brothels, and just places would host these poker or game tournaments. And Wild Bill Hickok was a very known gambling player, as well as a very well-known Wild West sheriff. Well, Bill actually earlier in the day had an argument with a man in the street, and, you know, they just, you know, parted ways, but that man, was still very much angry. And later in the afternoon, Bill was actually at the saloon playing a hand of cards. But Bill, unfortunately, had a dead man's hand, which was actually named after him. Bill had a hand of 2 8s and 2 aces. And Bill, from behind, was pew-pewed and unalived by the man he fought with in the street earlier that day, whilst playing cards. Now, if you have a dead man's hand, which is 2 8s and 2 aces, it could be one of two things. You could have a true dead man's hand or just a dead man's hand. A true dead man's hand actually is 2 8s, a club and a spade, and 2 aces of a club and a spade, making them all black. Because that is the exact combo of cards that Bill had when he was, you know. Now, the man who did unalive Bill was, in fact, sent to the gallows. But yeah, have you ever played cards and gotten a dead man's hand? I have. It's a little freaky. Mine was actually diamonds and hearts, though, so I was fine. But put in the comments below, have you ever actually had a dead man's hand while playing cards? Did you know Cowboys were... Hi, my name is Wendy Weather. I am the History Drag Queen, and welcome back to Wendy Goes Wild, where I tell you the history of the American Wild West. And did you know, in the Wild West, homosexuality and gender fluidity was actually not a big deal? Now, when you think of cowboys in the Wild West, it most likely is just like the super hyper masculine, like macho, tough, you know, kind of like John Wayne type, like spitting tobacco and, you know, with the pew-pews. A very rugged, hyper masculine image. And if that is how you view the Wild West and cowboys, you might be pretty shocked to hear their views on homosexuality and gender fluidity. Wild West society actually did not label people heterosexual or homosexual. They actually allowed people to be who they needed to be in the moment. And even it's backed up by several books, one of them being from a chairman from the University of Colorado at Boulder, wrote an entire research book based on sexuality in the Wild West. And after tons of research and cross-referencing with first, hand sources, Literally, people in the Wild West that engaged in same-sex attraction and activities were not seen as lesser than or homosexual. Now, that doesn't go without saying, cowboys did visit saloon girls and other places of business. But when women weren't present in large communities, say, for example, like a mining or like a ranching community, that were very isolated and just full of men, just men everywhere. But not only would some men fill domestically traditional women's roles, but also they would fill physical women's roles as well. And it was not seen as immoral, unethical, or anything bad. It actually was just very common, and you're like, yeah, duh. And so these large communities of cowboys and just large communities of men, mining camps, ranch camps, anything like that, would constantly be challenging gender roles both physically and emotionally. So yeah, Brokeback Mountain is technically historically accurate. What of it? And some of you are probably thinking they didn't think nothing was crazy. Well, they actually only did think one thing was crazy when it comes to sexuality and like acts of that nature. And it involved things involving this region. Yeah, if you did anything like that of that the sort, you were shunned. No, even a saloon girl, if you started doing that mess, you were seen very, very low and no ma'am. Now me, I am a good saloon girl. I would do nothing of the sort. But cowboys were gay.